And good evening, everyone. ESS, Empire State Sports, proudly presents the Wise Guy Sports Talk Show. Tonight, your hosts are Dave Bartlett, Joey Riom, and Pete Gosla. And our very special guest for the evening, a lot of you know him, a lot of them you don't, but he's going to
Mhm.
introduce you to us, Pat Donnelly. Pat, welcome to our program.
Thanks, guys. Nice to be here.
Pat, for those who don't know about you, why don't you give us a little background about yourself, and we'll go from there. How's that?
Sure. I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York. I went to Bishop Ludden High School in Syracuse. Played basketball and baseball there. Was a member of a Section Three championship team in 1975. Continued on to Potsdam State from 1976 to 1980. I was very, very fortunate to be with a lot of great players, and I think that we were the foundation, the team that's going into the Hall of Fame this year for greatness up there. I played on three Eastern Regional Championship teams. We went to the national championship game in 1978-79, lost the national championship game. The following year, we won the Eastern Regional again, and then we lost to a team, Longwood College out of Virginia, to go back to the Final Four. And the next year, 81, Potsdam won it. After I graduated with a degree in economics and a minor in computer science. Went to work for National Niagara Mohawk, which is now National Grid, primarily in information technology. Worked there for 31 years. And I coached high school basketball in the area for 38 years, my first five at East Syracuse Manoa, and then the last 33 years or so was at Bishop Ludden High School, my alma mater. And I met Dave up at Thundera Golf Course, and we both play a lot of bad golf together.
That we do.
I think that goes with all four of us.
So, Pat, look, I want to start with talking about your time at Bishop Ludden as the head coach there, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Give us a little idea of where the program was when you started, and then talk about, because you were there for 33 years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The program was in great shape. I took over from my high school coach, Jerry Wilcox, who was what I consider one of the best high school coaches in the state. And but I was over at East Syracuse Manoa then as the head varsity coach, and he was retiring. And he called me and you said, "Do you want to go for the Ludden job?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I was fortunate because in my job when I was at Niagara Mohawk, our territory was mostly upstate New York, so Buffalo, Syracuse, Albany. So there wasn't a lot of travel, and we didn't practice until 6, 7 o'clock in the evening anyway. It was just the one gym. So I interviewed, got the job. But the year before I got there, Ludden had just come back from the New York State Final Four with Len Roush and Gallagher Driscoll and people like that. And it was unbelievable. They beat King Rice's team in the regional finals. They beat Christian Leitner's team in the semifinals. And they lost to Greg Kubek's team in the state finals in Glens Falls. So I inherited two or three players out of there, Gallagher Driscoll and Paul Walker and so on. So, but I just had a run of great players. We won two state championships. We won I think 12 sectional championships, four regional championships. We went to the state final four times. It was a tremendous experience, especially coaching for your alma mater. And I was fortunate enough to be inducted into the first class at Ludden's Hall of Fame.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question about the Hall of Fame induction there.
Yeah, I've lowered the bar pretty good.
Any and I know coaches hate to do this, but any standout players that like really come to mind as like the cream of the crop, or that went on to do some good things in basketball?
Well, I was very fortunate. My first year, Gallagher Driscoll went on to St. Rose in their Hall of Fame, and then he coached assistant coaches at Loyola, Lemoyne, and University of Albany. And then he became the athletic director at Bishop Ludden, and he was my successor. Pat Campolita, who went on to Colgate, played in the Patriot League, was Patriot League Rookie of the Year, made all tournament there. I think three out of his 4 years, or I mean, all conference, 3 out of his 4 years. He's in their Hall of Fame. Terry Smith went to Mercyhurst on a full scholarship, played in Europe for, I think, 15 years. Really, really good player. And then just recently we had Micah Adams Woods, who went to Ludden and went to University of Cincinnati on a scholarship, and then played his 5th year at St. Bonaventure. So, but we were primarily a Division III, with the exception Division II, Division I players every once in a while.
Excellent.
The thing now is, the parents still don't understand how good you have to be to play Division III right now. Even when we played, the heavy lifting we did was at the Rusty Nail and any of those places. But now that Division III, it's a full-time job. They're on campus and they're working hard and those kind of things. I don't know if they're any better, but they're probably physically stronger than we were. But I mean, you go to watch any of these schools that are really good, and it's good basketball.
Well, back in our day, when you played basketball from November to March, and then you played baseball, and and you ran track, and you did all these other things. Now these kids, they play basketball 12 months a year,
yeah,
and they're training like, I never went in a weight room when I was in high school.
No, weightlifting was supposed to ruin your jump shot.
Exactly.
One of the first guys that I played with that really kind of dedicated himself to the weight room was Derek Rowland. Derek would go in and he would bang the legs pretty good because he came in really skinny at Potsdam. And then, he's one of the hardest working. And, I think he's the best player of all time at Potsdam. But he really turned himself into a great player. And he played with his back to the basket a lot in college. And then when he went to the Patriot League, or not the Patriot League, the Albany Patroons, the semi-pro league, he played facing the basket. I think he's still the all-time leading scorer in that league. Okay. So, but the other parts of coaching, I was not one to say you got to do my sport 12 months a year or you can't play. I wanted to have them play it all. If they enjoyed the other sports, that's great. I want them to go on vacation with their families and all that. We mostly did open gyms and maybe one night of summer league with what we did, and it worked pretty well. I did not want kids to get burned out. And now with AAU, where they're being told, you come play for this program, you're going to be a Division I player, and it doesn't work that way. But they're being sold that bill of goods, and they're being told they got to play 12 months, which I don't agree with.
Yeah, I don't either.
That's something I wanted to ask you, Pat, was because obviously living down in the Syracuse area, you're around like that. That's where the beginnings for us up here in the North Country. We got to get down to the Syracuse Albany area to get that constant AAU feel. You don't have that up here. We're bringing our high school teams to play in events like that. We don't have like AAU programs, maybe one or two. So, I mean, how did that impact you? Because, I mean, anybody that follows the AAU circuit realizes that there's tournaments every weekend, even during the high school season. Did you ever have any players that were on AAU teams that were like, hey, coach, I got an AAU tournament this weekend, can't make our Saturday game or practice? Or did you ever deal with that?
Well, that wasn't going to happen. I mean, but later in my career, AAU was not prevalent when I really first started coaching. It was more towards the end of my career. And a lot of the parents would come in and say, my kid's got to go play AAU and all this kind of stuff. And I said, and the majority, like I said, the majority of our players are Division III. And I would talk to the parents and I said, here's what's going to happen. I said, your son's a decent player. I said, if he's fortunate enough, he'll play at the Division III level. This AAU team he's going to play with, is that what he's going to do is you're going to pay these dollars and for all the uniforms, the bags, and all that kind of stuff, and the travel, and you're going to subsidize these really, really good players who are going to take up the bulk of the time that are really scholarship players. And some of them listened, some of them didn't. To me, from coaching a long time, it didn't take long to identify a Division I player or a scholarship player. Just the way they're built and the way they play, it's just different. But a lot of these other AAU coaches, some of them who were tied into big name players, if you will, they were looking for theirs, to see, okay, if you want to talk to so and so, you got to come through me. And oh, by the way, I'd like to be an assistant coach in your program. The NCAA kind of cleaned that stuff up, but I was not a fan of it. I said I was always a big fan of basketball camps. I think a week of intensive basketball, I always saw kids come back better. If you go out and you can't handle the ball or you can't shoot and you play 60 games, I don't think it's going to make you better in those two areas. But those are things you can do on your own or in your backyard or wherever to get better. And if you can master, ball handling, shooting, and passing, you're going to play someplace. So, like I said, I never bought into it, but we certainly had a few kids. Mike Adams Woods was at a different level. He was being looked at by Division I programs, so the exposure. And towards the end of my career is that a lot of these college coaches never got involved with the high school coaches. They just talked to the AAU coaches. So, it was complete change.
Well, and I'm out of that world now too, Pat. And in the North Country, again, it's a lot different but we did creep down into the Syracuse, once went down into Utica a couple of times. I brought my kids down there, but it's now to the point where it's like, I just, it's such a money grab that and people don't get it. They don't care. That's the thing. And this goes across all sports. This is not just basketball.
Right.
Of course, up here in North Country, people live in Canada. Most of the winter with hockey teams, they don't care. They will spend the money every weekend on the run. It's just amazing to me how it's changed.
Yeah, and you wonder why a kid comes back in November and they're just kind of going, "Oh, the season." That's what I didn't want. They're getting burned out. There's no doubt about it. And the thing is that I missed it. Just going to the open gyms and pickup games and playing against better players was how we got better.
Right.
Somebody would just take you. I remember we were playing. I was in college. We went out and played in the summer league, and all of a sudden I was guarding Eddie Moss from Syracuse. And I thought, okay, let's go. He killed me. He killed me. I forgot how big and strong he was. Hell, Cohen's a great friend, and what his skills were off the charts. And I grew up with Marty Head, and it was just how good they were to be at that level. And then you see the difference between Division III and Division I. But it's just, I think the stat is 1% out of all athletes get a full scholarship. 1%.
Yep.
So it's crazy to think that they're all scholarship, and I would send my parents literally to Division III games and say, go see how good these guys are before you start thinking about two and one.
Yeah, one of the other things that we talk about too is kids not only burning themselves out, Pat, but then you got to worry about all the excess games they're playing. Now they're opening themselves up to more injury also. Yeah. So then you got to worry about that, and if they're going to be ready for your program.
Without a doubt, that can happen. Amen. We lost a kid in a summer league game. He was a really good player. It was Pat Campbell's brother to an ACL injury. But they get worn down. There's no doubt about it. And my thing is that you went out and you played 50 games and you still can't shoot. I said, the really good shooters spent hours and hours of taking 500 or 1,000 jump shots a day just to make their form perfect and all that, and they chart themselves and all that kind of stuff. They don't do that anymore. They don't go to camp and get instruction. The best line I heard is that the Europeans practice the game, America plays the game. When you look at who's leading the NBA now, Luka and the Joker, these guys have off the charts fundamental skills, off the charts, and those are the guys who are starting to dominate the NBA.
Well, and they bring up not that same kind of phrase, but the ratio is always 6-1. Europe, we're going to practice 6 times and play a game. Over here, we're going to practice 1 time and play 6. And
right.
I'm thinking it's smaller scale, but still, it's got to be the same for everybody. I would think by the end of an AAU season where I've got kids running around in other spring sports and whatnot, you've got no time to practice. I always said, and it was right about this time because we've been going since the end of March, April, May. We're into early June, and I'm like, I don't have any team concept of defense anymore. We've given up because we're not practicing on it anymore. It's like it's time to be done. It's time to get back in the gym and start working on things.
Yeah, if you go to an AAU tournament, there's no defense. It's first over, half court, shoots it. And the other thing I had a problem with is that they became immune to losing. They went out.
Yeah.
And, how'd you do? Well, we played 7 games. How'd you do? Well, we lost all 7, but I had 15 points a game. I said, "Oh, great, that's beneficial." But they really didn't matter the winning and losing. They lost, like I said, the team concept. And I was raised on defense from high school and with Coach Welsh. I mean, that was our staple. We were always going to be solid defensively, and he got it through our heads is that every team is going to have an off night shooting the basketball, or they're going to turn the ball over. But if you're not good defensively, you're going to get blown out of the gym. But if you're top-notch defensively, you can stay in there, and then some of the shots might start falling. And these kids now, I mean, they don't suit up. They don't go out and play unless there's a scoreboard and trophies and all that kind of stuff. I said, we all know when we were young, we shoveled off driveways and all that to go out and shoot and play. And these kids, like we have 2 heads now. It's got to be I got to have a uniform, and God forbid nobody gets a trophy. The 15th place team gets a trophy. So yeah. Okay, well that's great. So and then their heads get filled up, how good they are. And but I was fortunate. I got around a lot of that. Most of our kids, I'd say 90%, bought into what we were selling. But there were a few kids that needed to go to AAU for the exposure because they were that good. I mean, a lot of them, I told the parents, I said, don't think you're going to go to these AAU tournaments and Mike Krzyzewski's going to walk in and go, oh, there's that kid from Ludden. It doesn't happen. So, yeah, I wanted them also to be kids. I want them to experience, going to a vacation with their families and doing other things so that when the season rolled around, they're saying, let's go.
They're ready.
That's the biggest. I think that was the biggest difference in why we were successful.
Yeah, when they're hungry, at the start of the season, they're hungry and they're ready to go, instead of, like you had mentioned, tired and burnt out. It's a world of difference.
Yeah, and I had some issues with New York State too when they were doing the state playoffs. Is that the state football playoffs would roll into the first part of basketball practice, and then the basketball season runs into baseball. There's plenty of time to stretch those things out. Especially in basketball where, you're playing 2 games a week, they can push our season back a little bit. We could finish a little earlier. Football, you got to have the week off. I understand that's a tougher game. But, all of a sudden you get kids come in that weren't going to be ready for the first game unless they had so many practices under their belt. And then they're coming off. So say you're in a state final in football. You're at this level. You're sky high. Now you're coming into your first day of basketball practice. You're going, oh, boy. They don't get a chance to rejuvenate and to say, okay, now I'm ready to play something else.
Not to mention they're behind.
Yeah.
Because you've already been going for a week or 2.
Right. So then you're forced to put put your offenses in twice and out of bounds plays and all that kind of stuff. Or even just make your cuts. You really can't finalize the teams sometimes because a lot of those players aren't there yet.
And chances are, if they're playing on a state, a state championship or, state Final Four team, they're probably a decent athlete. So they're not going to be, your end of the bench warmer or a guy you're going to cut. So, yeah. So, puts a time cramp on the coach, on you.
Yeah, without doubt. We had in 2007, Ludden won the state football championship. And we had probably 4 or 5 guys off that team. And it was hard for them when they first came into practice. Because then on top of that, they're going to banquets and they're being honored and things like that. And they said, Coach, can we go? I go, absolutely, you can go. I mean, you're champions. I'm not going to say, no, we got practice at 5 o'clock. You're not going to that banquet.
Right.
So, but that's something they earn, but it does impact, the progression of your team at that point.
Definitely.
So Coach, what year did you retire?
From coaching?
From coaching, yeah.
2018.
2018. So before, because I was just going to ask how we've gone to triple A now classifications. So what classification Bishop Ludden on a normal season when you were coaching?
Well,
Size
the majority of it, we were at the highest level.
double A.
What they did in Section 3 is that every 2 years they would evaluate private and charter schools as they became prevalent down the stretch, and that if you were successful, they'd bump you up. If you weren't, they kind of leave you alone. And then they just started leaving Ludden and CBA into the highest level. But when we went to Glens Falls in '94, we were a Class C team, and there was only A, B, C, D.
Right.
And
Right.
When we went in 2012, we were a B team, but it was still A, B, C, D. Then it went to double A and now triple A. And I think what that does, it placates a lot of people that these brackets now at all those levels are so watered down, where before you had to really work on everybody. You're going to play everybody. Somebody who's really, really good in your bracket all the time. I remember watching the state finals when Liverpool won it. And I watched it on from Florida on the New York State Public High School Network. And I said, this can't be the double A state championship game. But then what had happened, a lot of those kids had gone to prep school. So they've left the program. So they were nowhere as talented as when it was just 4 classifications. I mean, when we went down to Glens Falls in '94 and we were a C team, Felipe Lopez was playing for Rice in the championship game. Elton Brand was there when we were there. We had big names that were playing in the state tournament. And now a lot of those kids don't go because they're all in prep schools. So, but the double A, the triple A now, I mean, there's only like 4 or 5 schools, and they throw Ludden and CBA and basketball in there that meet that criteria. You know, West Tennessee lacrosse right now is like an A or a B. You know, and they were state powers at the highest level forever. So I think it's really watered down, but it does allow the state to award another state championship to a school, and so 3 or 4 more schools go away happy. I don't know. I'm not a fan of it though.
I'm an athletic director, so I have to be, I'm informed of all these things, and that's something that Dr. Zayas and NISPA and their championship committees, they want more. They want more winners, but as a basketball coach, I don't like it. I don't like it. It just feels like there's too many. It just feels like now. I mean, it just feels like it, especially up here in the North Country, where the D schools our D schools are. They've always been dominant, and now they're even more so dominant because the further you go down the state with the change in classifications, there's less D schools in the other sections. Our girls D schools, we probably had the last 2 years, probably the top 4 teams in the state. Our Final Four was probably better than the state Final Four.
Yeah.
Because of the new classification. The rest of the state has lost out at the bottom end of things. I know it helps the rest of the state at the top end. Doesn't help the top of the state at the top end. But at the bottom end.
Joe, what school are you at?
I'm at St. Lawrence Central, and we've always been a Class C school.
Yep.
And now all of a sudden I'm a Class B school in basketball. Never have been before, and we don't belong there. And it's going to take a while. I just retired from coaching. Somebody's going to have to start all over again and now build us up to be we were a state competitive Class C school, and now we got to try to be a B school, and it's going to be tough. It's going to be.
Well, I always felt kind of bad for Messina because Messina would have some really good teams,
right?
But they'd be banging heads with teams out of Syracuse every year in the game before you went to the next part of the regionals, and they could never get past them.
Yeah, well, it's a running joke up here in Section 10, Messina and Malone. That is one of the reasons why Section 10 has an overall Section 10 championship. That's what Messina and Malone are playing for, because they know whoever wins the Class A up here, they don't have a shot. They normally do not have a shot. So, I mean, I recall when DeJuan Coleman and Brandon Trish were playing for Janesville DeWitt, and they came up to Maxey Hall, the place was packed, and it had nothing to do with Malone. It had everything to do with JD, and DeJuan put on a show, and I'm just sitting there watching a good friend of mine, Timmy LeMay, getting his butt kicked in with a really good team.
Really good team, yeah.
but it just that's the way it is. It's just tough. So that's one of the reasons why we've kept the Section 10 championship, because our A schools, just Messina and Malone, that's what they're playing for, because they know that more than likely is whoever they get in the first round of states, they're going to get knocked out.
And the tail kind of wags the dog in a lot of this stuff too. People forget about league championships and things like that, of how important, winning a league championship might be harder than winning a sectional championship. Teams get on a run, and maybe they were middle of the pack and all of a sudden it happens. But, so the people, and I said, we got a stepping stone here. We wanted to win a Christmas tournament, then we wanted to win a league championship and then a sectional championship. But I didn't talk about those other steps, because there were 3 criteria. You had to be good, you had to be lucky, and you had to be healthy. And 2 of those you had no control over. So, and we had to have good chemistry. And sometimes you had it, sometimes you didn't. But I was always excited to see, like, I know when Steve Kamek had Potsdam, they were very good. And they were in the hunt down there, and Loudonville's had some really good teams lately. So I've got a lot of affection for the North Country. Being up there, it was a great place for me to go to school, and so you kind of have your heart. I even saw it like where Dave's up working. Town of Webb made the run one year to get to the sectional semifinal.
Yeah,
and that's great. It's great for the school, great for the kids. But like I said, and with us, it was always hard because they kept moving us all over the place. So we would play CBA and Ludden was always going to play, but then we had rivalries at Henniger and Nottingham, Cork, and all those city schools. Then we were out of there. Then we established rivalries with West Hill and some of those schools. Then they moved us from there. So it was just kind of a strange thing. But the rules were that everybody says, well, Ludden, they give out scholarships and all that kind of stuff. I said, well, if I did, people wouldn't beat us. I said, the thing is that we have our own school district. We're in the West Genesee School District. If you come to Ludden, you can come to Ludden from anywhere as a freshman, but if you can't transfer in unless you move into the West Genesee School District. So we have a district head, and we don't have the money that CBA has. We just don't, And so these kids were coming there, and they were paying, and but we were always accused every time we won of cheating. But when they were beating our brains in, it didn't seem to matter. But so it was. I always wanted to try and play at the highest level. Like even when we were Class C, my non-league schedule was built to find out how good we were. We would play somebody good in our Christmas tournament. We had Brooklyn Tech, and we had Holy Cross, and we had Thomas Bryant, who's now with the Indiana Pacers. Bishop Kearney was there. He played in there. We used to play them every year. So I said, just when they think they're really good, it's time to get a slap across the head to find out, that there's some pretty good teams out there. Keep them humble. Yeah.
So let's talk about your career at Potsdam.
It was funny because I was going through stuff. My mother was the ultimate scrapbook person.
Yes.
He kept all the stuff, and I pulled some stuff out, which is kind of cool. That I haven't looked at in a long time, and like this was our shooting shirt when I was in college, and then we got our names on the back and all that kind of stuff. So that was a big deal.
Those look familiar.
For some reason, it doesn't fit anymore. I don't know what happened.
Those things shrink.
Yeah, cotton
in storage.
Yeah. It's like my suits now. They don't seem to fit either. They shrink every year when they're in there.
Yeah.
But we had some things where there's a picture here where this is the regional game against this is just a home game against Plattsburgh. And if you can see the crowd at that game, that's Fran Demian going in for a layup. And then I was telling Dave the other night when we played in the regional to go to the national championship or to the Final Four against Clark College. I was walking over from the dorm. I was in Knowles and I was an RA, and I was walking over towards Maxie, and it was just the ramp there was just out and down the street, and it was and we went to the bottom, and we came out there, and the place was just there was any room at all in the place. The place erupted, and we beat them pretty good. We went on to the national championship game, but I was on a team with a great run that my freshman year, we lost to Hamilton in the ECACs. We didn't win the Suniacs. We lost to Cedric Oliver at Potsdam. my sophomore year, we went to the Eastern Regional down at Stony Brook and lost to the number one team in the country by 4. Stony Brook at Stony Brook. My junior year, we won the Eastern Regional. We beat Stony Brook, and then we beat St. Lawrence when Paul Evans was there. Paul Evans, he coached at Navy. They went on to Pittsburgh, and then we lost. And we won the quarterfinal game, and then we lost in the national championship to 3-time national championship North Park, who started 6'10", 6'9", 6'8", 6'5", and we had the ball down 2 with 20 seconds to go. And we lost by 4. And then my senior year, we were really good. We swept through the SUNY conference, swept through the Eastern Regionals, and then we got slapped around by Longwood College out of Virginia, who was going Division II the next year. It's funny, I got some of those programs. Like here's the quarterfinal program for when we played Longwood College. Here's the I got some. This is the Eastern Regionals from 1979, the booklets and all that kind of stuff. I got all these in the tournament. Here's 1980. This is the first time Potsdam hosted the Eastern Regional in 1980, and that was a big deal. Here's the halftime stats from the national championship game that they handed us at halftime. We got to each keep a copy of after, so you can see the scoring and all that kind of stuff. Had that kind of stuff. Here's this used to be a magazine called Eastern Basketball. And there was an article about Coach Welsh. And if you can see that, we were ranked number 1 in the country going into my senior year. First time ever that we've been ranked number 1 in the country. And I was trying to think what else we got here. There was just a bunch of stuff that was pretty good. And then this is the racket. I was a captain my senior year with Derek and Eddie, who to this day are friends. So, and then the 79 team is actually going into the Hall of Fame this year. And I was talking to Bill Mitchell about it. He called me and he said, "Pat, do you think of anything for the Hall of Fame?" I go, "Yeah, the 79 team." I said, I feel we got to kind of start it because we're the first one to get to the Final Four. And then I'm looking at other teams going into the Potsdam Hall of Fame, and they were Sunyak champions and things like that, but no national prominence. So we're going in this year, which is nice. And we were fortunate that Fran Demian and Jack Bissetta, who were both Hall of Famers, were the captains of that team. Really, really good players, great leaders. And then Derek and Eddie were Roland and Eddie Jacob were sophomores on that team, and they were just up and coming. But I think Derek and Eddie, they learned that there's more, and they got hungry for that national championship. And they won it in 1981. But playing for Coach Welsh was one of the best things that ever happened to me. He was just a great person, is a great person, great coach. And when I coached, he would send me stuff like you wouldn't believe. He'd fax stuff, and he'd come into town and play golf, and he'd give me these binders of just basketball stuff. And he would use these index cards that he would write down his practice schedule, and I did that. And I took so much of what he did. We were so prepared when we went into a game. Like, he would have the clock running in practice, and Coach Cohen or Coach Kamak would have a team, and Coach Welsh would kind of be walking the sidelines. And somebody would score, and all 5 guys immediately would call timeout if we were down. We'd go, and then he would simulate going over to the benches where the players on the floor would sit down, the other players would huddle around, and they go over what they have to do. To that extent, it was right to, and so we were really so prepared. And it was just great to play for him. I tried to carry those things over when I coached in high school. But I think the education was really good. It did well by me. It was a great place to go to school with Clarkson and St. Lawrence and Canton. But the coaching between Coach Welsh and Stan Cohen was one of my favorites. He was just one of the best guys in the world. And Steve Kamak did a great job with the JV program. We were very fortunate. I played with some great players. It was just one of the best experiences of my life.
Pat, we tell people all the time about as kids in the North Country. And we say this almost every time we talk to somebody that has, been in the Potsdam program. it was the mecca of basketball for us in the North Country to able to go there as kids, stand in line just to get in there. And Lord knows they don't have the crowds they used to back then.
No,
I mean, they were standing on the sidelines. All the press was down on the. You had to get there early in order to get a seat. And it's too bad that it's not like that today because I think a lot of kids didn't experience what we experienced back then. It was really unbelievable.
no, and you know we had Coach was an unbelievable recruiter. I mean, but he scoured. We had kids from Staten Island, Long Island, and a lot of Syracuse players. He would get players out of Rochester. Didn't not too much Rochester and Buffalo, but Syracuse was big. And to this day, he can tell you the names of the parents and you know where they lived and how the recruiting went. But it was I was so fortunate. I came from a winning program in high school and I went to a winning program in college where a lot of kids sometimes play for a winning program in high school, but don't have that same experience in college. And it's just not the same. You know, we were so successful, not only just the student body, but the town bought into the program so much and you had Clarkson hockey right down the road, which is a big time Division I school. You know, I was smart enough to hang out with some of the Clarkson hockey players because if there was a fight in the bar, I said, "Go get them, fellas." Then
Yeah.
I'm right behind you. You know, so
Right behind you.
but it was a great experience, and the rivalries. Clarkson wasn't great in basketball at that time, but St. Lawrence was really good. But when we go down to Albany and play, Albany would be sold out. It's not the arena they play in now, and I'll tell you what, it was a lot of fun, and I wouldn't trade it.
We've all been lucky enough to have some, you know, in our case, limited exposure to Coach Welch, but he really leaves a lasting impression on everybody that comes in contact with him. I know for myself, it was with his summer basketball camp. You know, I started going to that I was in elementary school and went all the way through high school. And he's an amazing, an amazing memory because like a kid like me, you know, that went to Salmon River Central, but I went to his camp and about the fourth or fifth year I went to his camp, he recognizes you and he remembers you,
Yep.
you know, and I know Joey's got a very, very good, close relationship with him. And,
yeah, I mean, when you were doing the interviews for when they did the Audacious Bears, the documentary, and they announced Coach's record. Now, a lot of those games, his uncle and his brothers and all that, they refereed. You know, that was the issue at one time. People didn't. I'll tell you the story. It's a true story. It was Doc Sowers from Albany, so they'd come up to Potsdam to play, and the referees there were a little one-sided. Maybe a lot one-sided, and they called this one referee, and I'll leave his name off the video, but they said, you know, Doc Stars, go take a look at the film and see all the calls he missed. So they reviewed the film with him, and they said, the guy goes, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "I didn't miss a lot of calls. I can see maybe 15. And then after that, this is legitimate. We had Froggy Paparo, we had Burr, we had Bob Falasco. We got all Syracuse officials whenever we would play St. Lawrence or we'd play Albany and those kind of schools. So we had a lot of big name officials come up there. But Coach's attention to detail is mind-boggling. And he not only knew the game, but he always wanted to know the players, you know, and he took an interest in your life while you were there and especially after. I mean, we did the 80th birthday call with him. There must have been 45, 50 players on a Zoom call. And obviously he got very emotional. We all did. And I was so hoping that he would get into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame this year. I think there might have been a lot of us down there, but just to get nominated. And when you look at the people that have been nominated this year, it's crazy to be in that class. And and I don't think he's going to be able to get up to Potsdam for the 79 team induction. He doesn't travel well anymore. But yeah, he's one of those guys. If he came around now, he would get swept up to a big school. He gave it a shot at the end, but it really wasn't. He really wasn't that much into it. Maybe it was a shot to hand off to Timmy, who was a great coach. But I think a guy like him would have jumped up the ladder pretty quickly and gotten a big job and done very well.
Yeah, just his knowledge of the game and how to take the players he has and mold them into the game that they do best at, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. He was a big, when I first got there, he was a huge Bobby Knight fan. So our uniforms were actually styled after Indiana, the warmth and all that kind of stuff. And so he'd have all his players that were incoming take a coaching techniques class. And what we did is we watched game films of Indiana running the motion offense, and usually just happened before practice. I remember the first quiz, and I got 100 on it. He said, "How many of you think conditioning is important in basketball?" Okay, he got 100. So it was good to be in his class.
That's funny.
We weren't quite the North Carolina scandal, but we were close.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that this show, I mean, I don't know, we've probably done 150 shows. We've got two main themes: SUNY Potsdam, Jerry Welch basketball is one of them. And I know it's been brought up more than once. You talk about Jerry in the nowadays, he would have probably been funneled up to the D1, a big time D1 program. But the other thing that we've always said in other guests, if he wanted to be the president of the North Country or the mayor or whatever you want to call him, he would have won 99% of the vote.
Oh, no way.
He was amazing with people. And I never heard him say the word no. I just, if you asked him to do something, he would do everything in his power to do it for you.
Yep.
He is the most helpful person that a high school coach in the North Country could have had. I was lucky to have him. He was a blessing. It's just what a great man.
Yeah, and he had such a dry sense of humor too. And him and Coach Cohen, I'm telling you, there were times that they would kind of just go ahead and tooth and nail. But the best one was with Paul Evans. He hated Paul Evans. And Paul Evans hated him. So we're at St. Lawrence, and we're playing St. Lawrence, and it comes halftime, and Coach Cohen comes in, no Coach Welsh. He and Evans were nose to nose up in the hallway, bitching at each other about anything and everything. About, you're getting all the calls. No, you're getting all the calls. So Coach comes in, he walks in, he goes, "Let's go kick their ass." I said, "All right, let's go." So the rivalry was real.
Well, I hate to change subjects because we could talk about Jerry all night. But you did bring up a couple other names, and I just was curious, being down in the Syracuse area on a constant basis. Number one, did you coach against Bob McKinney at all?
Oh yeah, all the time. Bob and I started out at Potsdam,
right,
for a year, and then his girlfriend at that time was his first wife. She went to St. Lawrence. So we transferred to St. Lawrence. So, but I've known Bobby since since I was a senior in high school. When I first got to Potsdam, Syracuse University hadn't started practice yet. So we would go down to Canton, play pickup. Bobby McKinney and Hal Cohen, myself, and John Snyder, and a few other people. And that's how I got to know Bobby. So, yeah, we played against Bobby against some of those really, really good teams. And then, and he had his way with us pretty good. And then I kind of got to him towards the end of his career at JD. And then I don't think he beat me at Grimes, and I don't let him forget that. But Bobby's one of the best coaches in the area.
Yeah. And we were lucky enough to have Bob and Hal Cohen on both on a show And it was it was an eye opener. And of course, Bob played for the great Jerry Howerhand up here.
Yeah, great coach
in Canton. So yeah, there's just more of those North Country connections. So I kind of figured, I'm like, geez, you must have coached against Bob throughout your time.
Well, there was one game we were at Ludden, and I think he was at JD, and we were beating him. And so Bobby was throwing a fit, because he was doing splits and headstands and everything down there. I said, how does this guy get to walk on the floor? And Bobby heard me. So he comes walking at me like he's going to kill me. I said, Bob, I go, stop. I go, you're 4'1". I go, get away from me. So we're like nose to nose. And then about 2 seconds later, we're laughing, we're shaking hands and hugging and all that kind of stuff. And actually, when I retired, was the year I retired, we were playing at Grimes, and he put together a nice night, honoring me and that kind of stuff before our game there. He's a class guy. And, I feel bad for him but his high school where he was at Bishop Grimes is now merging with my high school, Bishop Ludden. And so he lost his job there. He's going to the school called Ontech, which is a charter school. And, he'll turn him around. They're just kind of getting started. But Bobby's really good, great guy, a lot of fun, really tenacious on the basketball court. He was just a bulldog. And but yeah, we had some good go arounds.
Well, we're getting about the end of our time here, Pat. We really, really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, I love it. It's great. I love talking basketball, you guys. I really appreciate it. It brings back some great memories up at Potsdam. And like I said, it was a special place. And hopefully somebody will get up there and turn it around and make it special again.
Yeah. And we all, I speak for all of us when I say congratulations on the 78-79 team induction. And I hope you have a great night there.
I'm sure we'll do okay.
When's the induction, Pat?
It's alumni weekend. It's July 12th.
Okay.
They have like a little bit of lunch. I don't even think you pay for it, but I'm not sure how many guys are coming back. They haven't told me, but I'm going to be up there. I'll probably come up from Syracuse. And yeah, it's quite an honor. Anytime your alma mater recognizes you, it's quite an honor. So okay. that team deserves it. I was fortunate to be on that team because there were two great captains, two good All-Americans. And then, after that, Mo Woods came up after that, and Mo just passed away. So, this is, you never know. This might be the last time you see somebody. So right. It'll be a nice day.
Well, Pat, I want to thank you wholeheartedly for coming on our show. A lot of great memories you brought up to us, and I would love to take a look at that collection your mom saved you. That's got to be an unbelievable collection you got there. I'll tell you that.
I got pictures and articles from the bracket and all that kind of stuff. I'm going through it, and it's kind of hard to think that you lived it, but it's a lot of stuff there. So,
well, we appreciate you spending an hour with us, and again, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. You guys do a great job. Really enjoyed it.
That's going to be it tonight here on ESS, Empire State Sports and the Wise Guy Sports Talk Show for Dave Bartlett, Joey Real, myself, and our special guest, Pat Donnelly. That's it. Good night, everybody.